I think I have always felt like a bit of an alien. As early as preschool, I remember observing other kids, and they were sort of like these curious creatures of they played very differently to me, they socialized very differently to me. I did a lot of ballet. And so anytime I was stimming or walking on tippy toes, that was labeled as like, oh, she's having a ballet moment, not like, oh, that is a really clear marker of autism.
Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss unconventional productivity tactics designed for neurospicy people. I interview neurodivergent guests who've figured out secrets for getting a ton of amazing work done without burning out. I'm your host, Jeremy Nagel. I'm an ADHD software developer turned startup founder and PhD candidate. I built FocusBear to help with my own productivity and burnout challenges. Welcome to episode number 135 of the Focus and Chill podcast. I'm thrilled to be joined by Avalon McWha today. Avalon is a passionate ADHD advocate. She works as an autism consultant at the Royal Melbourne Hospital and raises awareness via lectures and public speaking events. Avalon is also the founder of Pebble.tech. Pebble is a robot companion that captures reminders with voice and creates tactile cues and nudges. Screen-free and not AI, Pebble keeps you focused on real life. Outside of work, Avalon is a digital health researcher and cat person. Welcome to the show, Avalon.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on, doing some really cool things with Pebble. Keen to hear more about that a little bit later. But let's start off with your journey of being diagnosed. Can you talk about when you first realized that you weren't neurotypical?
Yeah, this is a funny question. I think I have always felt like a bit of an alien. Like I was reflecting on this, and as early as kind of like preschool, I remember observing other kids, and they were sort of like these curious creatures of they played very differently to me, they socialized very differently to me. So yeah, I've kind of always felt like there was something a bit different, but yeah, it wasn't until later in life that I really figured out what was what.
Well, that's amazing that you can remember back to those days. I can't really remember much of preschool. Do you have a very acute episodic memory?
Yeah, I like my first memories are from when I'm about one. So
Wow.
not a very good short-term memory, but quite a good long-term memory.
Mm.
Yeah.
And what was it like as you grew up? Did that feeling continue?
That feeling of like being a little bit alien or
Alien?
other. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. I went to quite a few different schools, which I think is maybe why teachers and things didn't pick up on that I was autistic until later. I jumped into a fresh school in grade 1 and grade 8. And so
Mm.
there was this like, oh, she's just the new kid. She's just got to acclimatize. She's just shy or anxious. So yeah,
Mm.
definitely that feeling of otherness and that sense of, I guess, what I now know is masking of like an outside persona and then an inside world that felt quite different.
Yeah. And were you good at masking? I wasn't a very good masker.
I think to my own detriment, I was a good masker. And
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah. What did that look like in terms of the experience of masking and also the side effects of it?
Yeah, I think maybe gender has like a little bit to play as well. Like I'm a kid of the 90s, and so the concepts that girls could be autistic was kind of not as widely known by teachers and things back
Hmm.
that time, but also being like the eldest of a few siblings and often being like the only kid in a space, I really learned how to be based on the adults that were around me. And so
Mm.
as like you can see in my school reports, it's like she's very mature, she's very quiet and attentive and really like strengths based, which is lovely. But yeah,
Mm.
there was definitely some high masking ways that I kept things under wraps. Like, for example, I did a lot of ballet. And so anytime I was stimming or walking on tippy toes, that was labeled as like, oh, she's having a ballet moment, not like, oh, that is a really clear marker of autism.
Oh, wow. Yeah, because the tippy toes walking is a autistic trait, but
Yes.
also ballet moment. I like it. And then later on in life, what was it like in the workplace?
In the workplace. I had a funny transition from school to the workplace. So I left high school in grade 11 and I started my degree when I was 17.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
which I think was largely due to like the social nuance of high school was really intense for me. And it was actually so much easier to jump into a university setting that was a bit more self-guided, solo, not so many contact hours.
Mm,
Yeah. And so I finished my degree when I was 19 and then went into the corporate world as a UX designer, which definitely had its ups and downs. Like I think UX design and kind of the tech industry in general can be more neurodivergent friendly. Um,
mhm.
Most places I worked didn't have crazy dress code. I got to spend a lot of time alone with my headphones on, doing really structured, systematic work, which I love. But then the corporate world is also fairly sexist, ageist, ableist. So just navigating all of that as a young female, undiagnosed autistic had lots of interesting moments.
Mm. Yeah, I hear you on that. And it's interesting actually hearing about that, the career journey. I didn't realize that you finished high school and went straight into uni quite early. Do you think is that a pathway that might be helpful for many neurodivergent people, skipping, I guess, some of the intensity of year 12 and going straight into uni?
It definitely had its pros and cons. Like, I think it really doubled down that alienation of, now I was a 17-year-old doing university alongside people in their 20s. And so it almost made it easier in a sense because I was an alien for lots of reasons, not just because I was socially odd, but also not finishing year 12 means you don't get an ATAR. And so if you're not sure what you want to do in life yet, it can be a risky jump. Like I didn't have an ATAR equivalent until I finished my degree. So I really
Mm,
had to be sure that that was what I wanted to do.
yeah.
But there's some really cool educational alternatives now of like doing year 11 and 12 in lots of different ways, which is exciting.
Yeah, I did a traditional year 11 and 12, and I just went back to my high school last week and spoke to some year nines about career choices and some reflections on what it was like. And I don't think it was really worth me going through year 12. I did well, I got a good ATAR, but I don't really remember much of what I learned. It felt very cram based and doing things not necessarily interest based, but because they would have a higher scaling factor. And I don't
Yeah.
I don't think that's very motivation friendly for neurodivergent people.
Yeah,
I
no,
guess.
you're very right. There's not a lot of actual content I remember from high school. It was more about how does this boil down to this magic number that is your
Mm,
ticket into tertiary education. So yeah.
mm. And then in terms of work, you mentioned that you were in quite structured roles and that it was challenging in terms of the overall environment. But what was the journey between, I guess, finishing uni, starting working in corporate, and then getting diagnosed? What was the moment that led you to seek diagnosis?
There was definitely a few stepping stones. My first corporate role was a design gig in like a prestigious real estate company. It was easy to mask there in a sense that there was such a cookie cutter culture of, okay, these are the 5 things you wear. This is the like 5 phrases that you say to your key stakeholders. It was really very like formal, repeatable. I was there for a little while and then I went and worked in, gosh, what's the word for it? I guess learning design. I was designing modules for like if you've ever taken a summer job and you've got to do all your little online OHS modules, things like
Ah,
that.
yeah.
And that was this blend of like I was a visual designer, but I was using like a no code platform. This was a long time ago, so it wasn't really called no code, but like it was really technical. And so
Mm,
for a year and a half, I listened to like thousands and thousands of podcasts on finance, on coding, on whatever. Whilst doing this really technical work, I had nearly no meetings. I had nearly like no social interaction in that job. So my undiagnosed autistic traits were like very comfy in that setting. And then I went and worked at a startup. And then all of a sudden, I was the designer, I was the product person, I was needing to have like less structured meetings and stakeholder chats and the burnout was real. I'd like come home and be like, oh, I'm out of words. I'm quite an articulate person, but I would just run out of word count for the day and
mm,
go effectively nonverbal.
Mm.
And that ran into COVID. And so then through COVID, obviously there was a rise of awareness across social media about neurodivergence. As the algorithm does, it started serving me things I was interested in watching and going, oh, that's kind of relatable. Oh, it's all relatable. Oh, this is me. Like this slippery slope of that was in 2023. And then I went through a formal diagnosis process and classic overachiever scored very highly and the rest is history.
Hmm. What was the diagnosis process like for you?
It was quite mixed. I went to a GP with a list on my phone of traits that I thought were a bit odd, from things like being really particular about types of spoons and cutting tags and things that I now know are like really overt traits. But at the time, it was just this running list on my phone. And I went to a GP and I said, I think I might be ADHD. Here's a list of things. I don't really want to talk about it, but here's my phone. Have a look at this list. And this GP that I'd never met before, he goes, and he's probably in his 50s or 60s, quite like formal doctor. He goes, this is giving tism. And I was like, that is not what I thought you were going to say or how you were going to say it. I was like, oh, okay. Curveball. And then he referred me to a clinical psychologist and we did assessment for autism and ADHD. And at the time, I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD. The person I saw was really old school and still thought that autism and ADHD were differential so that you couldn't have both. They were really keen to put Asperger's as my diagnoses, and I had to push back on them and go, well, that's not in the DSM anymore. That's not really a valid diagnoses. But yeah, it was a series of pretty invasive like questionnaires and interviews about my life with a psychologist, and then got a pretty brief report and then just went away for a few years and tried to process that. And
Hmm.
then I got diagnosed with ADHD just last year when someone said it's not differential. A lot of people have both.
Was that a similar experience or more affirming?
Much more affirming. I went through a psychiatrist at that time, and because we already had all this collateral from my autism assessment, it was a 45-minute interview. They had lots of data. And about 20 minutes in, she's like, I mean, you definitely have ADHD. And it was really straightforward.
Yeah, I think it was similar in terms of with my autism, the first time I got an autism assessment, taking some time to digest it. What sort of things did, did, did you go through a process of reliving some of the things that had happened in the past and reorganizing the memories that you had around them? What was the experience like?
Yeah, you've nailed it. I definitely went through kind of like a 7 stages of grief of kind of a real like realizing my own internalized ableism of like, oh, I can't possibly be because XYZ, and just kind of having to unpick that autism is, I mean, it's not, I know disorder is in the official name, but just that autism isn't an inherently negative thing and that it's not a terminal thing. Someone asked me, oh no, that's tragic. Is it terminal? Um, but yeah, I definitely went through kind of the 7 stages of grief, which included like a lot of reflecting back on my own life, connecting the dots, and then that sort of anger and frustration at the system of there were so many signs. How did we not pick this up?
Mm,
Because alongside like my career journey that I've shared, I was heavily supported by the mental health system for about a decade from when I was 15 to 25, and it was never really queried. It was just, oh, you're an anxious girl.
mhm.
So yeah, lots to process. It really shook up every aspect of my life.
Yeah. It's probably a more helpful way of looking at things rather than it just being anxiety, that there being a reason for why you felt anxious.
Yeah. Yeah, we finally had like a root cause, and it completely changed the mental health care that I received. I went from getting a lot of like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like talk therapy, which actually isn't great for someone that often runs out of words,
Hmm.
to doing like dialectic behavioral therapy and working with an occupational therapist. That was when I realized that all of this like habit formation and focus and like that was the root cause for a lot of my anxiety and my struggles. And that's when I got really into that part of my life.
Could you talk more about the difference you've observed between CBT and DBT?
Yeah. I did cognitive behavioral therapy with a psychologist from the age of 15 through Headspace. They're like a public mental health service.
Mm,
Really helpful in a lot of ways, but it's about like when you have a thought, you are to interrupt that thought and examine whether it's emotional, whether it's rational, and then reframe it before you let it settle in your psyche, which is someone that's always got lots of different trains of thought and is already very much a systems thinker. I took that extremely literally. And that I think added like extra cognitive load. You're like, okay, I must analyze every thought even more than I already do as an overthinker.
mm,
And then just the fact that it was so talk based. Once I started doing DBT, and I did a lot of my DBT and a lot of my work post diagnosis with a peer worker rather than a psychologist or someone else with a lived experience of autism. And we would do things like write notes and emails back and forth in between sessions, or we'd do part of the sessions where we'd talk in the chat, or
mm,
these ways that weren't so hinged on talking. And that was really helpful.
mm.
I can explain a bit about DBT, but I'm not sure what the audience is
Yeah.
interested in.
No, good to hear about it at a high level because I think many people would also resonate with that. I've definitely haven't had a great experience with talk-based therapy either. Similar kind of issue around running out of words. So post-diagnosis, what's life like now? Some things are probably a lot easier, that you're more aware of things that you find easy and your strengths. And are there still any challenges that you face?
Yeah, it's definitely still a mixed bag, but I understand myself a lot more and I have a lot more like accommodations and supports in place that just help me not run out of spoons or not spend my capacity on the wrong thing. Um,
Mm,
Even really simple things like I'm always wearing different sorts of earplugs and noise filters, and because I don't have endless energy and I don't want to waste it on things that can be mitigated with different tools. Like I wear a lot of sensory friendly clothing now, and I'm really quite particular with just accommodating my sensory preferences because it feels like a waste of energy to tolerate things that are within my ability to change.
mm,
I mean, post diagnosis, my career trajectory completely changed. I have a really strong sense of justice, like a lot of autistic people. Um, and now I work in the sector because I just did so much learning for myself and, wanted to share that and hopefully help some other people as well. So,
mm.
yeah.
Yeah, so we can talk about your work now. That's probably a natural progression. You want to talk about the multiple roles that you have?
Yes, lots of hats. So, yeah, working at Royal Melbourne, I'm the Autism Consumer Consultant, which is a fancy way of saying that I'm like their in house autistic mascot. The Royal Melbourne Hospital is a huge hospital. I work out of their community mental health team in Moonee Ponds. And within that team, there's an autism diagnosis service. And so that's for people like me that later in life are being supported by the mental health system. And someone goes, hey, this person might be autistic. I think we've missed it. I think we've mislabeled it. And they come through my team, which is built up of psychiatrists, psychologists, OTs, and me. And really, my job within that team is to just keep sticking up my hand and go, remember, this is a person. Remember, this is a human being. This is a nuanced individual, because the diagnostic process is really rigid and it's a lot of numbers, data points, scores, but ultimately, we're all still people. So I do a lot of advocacy in that space, and particularly advocacy for people that have got complex intersections of lots of different diagnoses, and standard diagnostic tools might not be able to pick up all that nuance. So, say someone that's also anxious and ADHD and autistic, these like rigid scale based tools become less and less helpful. And then the other half of my role there, which is really interesting, is how do we make a hospital more sensory friendly? Hospitals are meant to be where we go to get better, but they're full of beeping and loud noises and lights. And I do what I can on little projects of how can we make the hospital experience a little bit more kind of neural affirming and sensory friendly.
That would be amazing if you could nail that.
Why are
That
the
was
lights so bright?
Yep. Why is it so confusing to get around?
Yeah, yes. 100%.
And then as well as that, you also have your own business too.
Yeah, yep. So I'm building an assistive technology to help with executive functioning. It's called Pebble. It's a small wearable device and it's completely voice based because I found a lot of different strategies. Like before and after diagnosis, I've always been kind of trial and erroring what works for me, what works for my learning styles. And a lot of strategies, whether they're apps or physical paper, or they add extra cognitive load. And so what I'm really trying to do with Pebble is something that's really stupid simple and just doesn't add to the burden or the list of things to do, but is something that hopefully reduces the friction. And yeah, it's a really exciting project and it's really cool because it's not setting out to replace anything that already exists. Like I see a future where it integrates perfectly with something like Focus Bear because Pebble is about gluing together your day, including the time you might be on the computer, and then Focus Bear is there to kind of handle what happens on screen, what happens on your phone.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it will be really cool. I especially think in the evening it would be particularly helpful for me because I want to be off screens at that time. So I'm keen to be an early adopter.
Very cool. Can be in the
And
beta
I
program.
and I imagine in terms of it being voice based, it wouldn't require me to speak in a particular way when you're talking about running out of words. That's often me in the evening as well, that it would
Yeah.
understand if you're quite succinct or speaking in a soft tone.
Well, yeah, that's the really cool thing is that Pebble's not AI. We're using a language model that can understand different phrasing, different accents, different languages. But it's not an AI. It's not trying to be a companion. It doesn't want to have long conversations with you. It's really simple prompts of, hey, it's time to brush your teeth, or hey, can you set a reminder that in the morning I've got to pack my lunch, or it's very much just instructional.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Nice. And when you're not working, what do you get up to?
When I'm not working. It's ironic that like I'm building effectively like a well-being tool, but it is encroaching on my ability to look after my own well-being. Um, Exercise is really important to me for a number of reasons. I've learned a lot about like somatic therapy, which is where you look after your body first and then your body feeling good flows upward towards the brain. A lot of Western therapy is about sorting out your brain first and then things flow outwards. But yeah, I really love somatic stuff. So I do a lot of different sports, but have to keep mixing them up because I'm ADHD. And if I do anything for too long, it gets boring. But yeah, I also read books and have a lot of like hyperfixations and special interests that I'll dive into and then set them aside for months and then come back and try and not put too much pressure on myself outside of work. I just follow whatever feels interesting on the day.
Mhm. Nice. What are the different sports that you're trying at the moment? And what's the craziest one you've tried? Or the not craziest, but the most diverse one you've tried?
I reckon the most intense one I've done last year, I got really into rock climbing. I know that's really stereotypical for the neurodivergent and the tech community, but here we are. Yeah, I got really into rock climbing last year and like I got pretty strong and pretty fit. And then I went on holidays and it all just went away. But yeah, I was very into that. At the moment, I'm doing a mix of yoga, running, and swimming. Hypermobility is a big overlap for neurodivergent people. And my
Mhm.
physio was like, you need to stop doing impact sports because your joints are going to run out of quality material. So
Mm.
trying to convince myself I like swimming, but I don't love the whole process of being dry and then cold and then wet and then well, it's a lot of steps. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm the same. And I don't really dislike the smell of chlorinated pools,
Mm. And
but
it's just
swimming,
germy as well. They're full of kids and yeah.
mm, but I like swimming at the beach.
I don't like the ocean because you don't know what's in there. Anything could get you at any time.
Yeah, the worst that you'll get in the bay is probably jellyfish,
Yeah, this is true.
but they are pretty scary.
Mm.
Okay, so going back to work again, what do you do when you've got all these different roles and when you're running a business, you've got all these hats to wear? How do you optimize your productivity so you're getting the most things done without burning out?
Yeah, it's a fine balance. I've talked before about this concept of like cat dog, and it's like a lot of my ADHD needs are like a golden retriever, like needing a lot of novelty, keep changing it up. And then there's this cat side of me that's represents the autistic traits of wanting structure and routine and, you know, the same blanket and the same food.
Mm.
I guess it's similar to my personal life that I create buckets of structure, but then within that structure, I need a little bit of chaos to stay motivated and to keep my attention engaged. I do use Focus Bear. I will plug that. That has been hugely helpful just because the bulk of my work is done on a computer and anything and everything is always one tab away. And that's always been really challenging. I also use Do Not Disturb a lot across my phone and my computer so that when I'm focusing, I'm not going to get pulled out at any moment. I'll come back at intervals throughout the day and check my notifications because if anything's super urgent, then I think if someone calls you 3 times in a row, it bypasses Do Not Disturb. So if there's an emergency, I'm reachable, but otherwise I try and kind of protect my focus because once I'm in the flow state, it's a lot of fun and I don't want to get like broken
Mm,
out of that.
100%. And the mixing up the novelty and the structure, I can definitely relate to that. And they do feel like opposing forces at times. That
Mhm.
I like creating new structures, but I don't always enjoy sticking to them
Mhm. How like
forever.
I know the questions are for you, but how often do you like change up when you need a new?
I think I'm similar to you in the way I've set it up is that I have a general theme that, for example, I have in the morning, I don't check my email first thing. I want to do some deep work. And I have the choice of whether I start with data analysis or whether I start with creative writing. And either of those are helpful, but I don't always want to do either one of them first. So I choose one of them first each day, and that randomness is helpful.
Yeah, that's cool. That makes me think of like sort of like a choose your own adventure book of like you're gonna get stuff done, but it's up to you kind of order.
Yeah. And then you spoke about do not disturb and batching things. Is it the same with emails as well?
Yeah, so I turn off notifications from everything. I don't have a lot of desktop apps installed on my computer, which is maybe controversial. I know if you're an employee of a company, it's usually enforced. But most of what I do is browser based. So I can just close all the tabs figuratively and literally and just not come back to it until those points in the day. I don't love apps that accumulate like a little number in a red circle because
Oh, yeah.
I just don't want to see that. Like,
Hmm. Yeah. I always want to get it to zero, even if it's something that isn't in my best interest to get to zero.
yeah, it's that like that closure of like, okay, I can fully, completely close that tab now in my brain.
Yeah. And then further with email, so batches is a good idea. But some emails I find are tricky because it's not just replying, it's also that there's actions required in there. And some of them are more interesting to look at than others. Do you ever find anything like that?
Yeah. Do you mean like something will be not critical, but it's interesting? So I just follow that rabbit hole when actually there's 3 other urgent emails that are,
Hmm.
yes. And I guess it comes back to what you were saying about like when there's choice, personal interest kind of leads the way. I use Notion quite a bit as sort of my triaging system. So if something's a bit more complicated than just a reply, I'll put it in my little like project management tool. And again, I always want my little project management tool to be like back to zero by the end of the day or the end of the week. So it's just like placing everything somewhere that it is recorded because I can't really rely on my short-term memory.
When you say getting it to zero, do you mean just that the tasks that you had for today are at zero? Or do you mean you have completed every single task that you...
Not possible. Yeah, so I have four columns. I have like a backlog of things I need to do, and then I'll drag it into like do this today, things that are in
Mm.
progress, things that are done. And I'm
Hmm.
just always trying to make sure that like things to do today one ends up back at zero. And if it doesn't, then I either put it back in the backlog or I try and finish it off. So
Yeah,
I can
nice.
sleep at night and not think about anything being in progress.
And I imagine if it's a really big task that can't be completed in one day, then you'd be okay about splitting it or putting it back into the backlog with it partially completed.
Yeah, I mean, I for a long time I worked in like tech teams where you use Jira as your project management tool. So it's very similar to that of like you don't leave anything too high level, like you break things into little chunks. And
Mm.
yeah, if it is too big to do in one day, I'll usually break it up.
What about if you had this marvelous day where you had no meetings and you thought you were going to be able to get a lot of things done, but then emergencies always happen,
Mm.
and then halfway through the day it gets derailed? What do you do in that case where you had a whole day task planned or half a day task planned and you don't have time anymore?
I think I've gotten pretty good at triaging. I mean, for me, like autism is a dynamic disability. If I never really know how much capacity I might have or random things might completely zap that capacity. Like I go for a mental health walk, but then there's sirens and a barking dog, and I come back just drained.
Mm.
Um, so I do a lot of triaging. This is why I like tools where you can kind of drag and drop things into an order because I'm always trying to just sort things into okay, the day has not gone to plan. What are the things that absolutely must get done? And how can we just put everything back
Mm.
for another day? But
Yeah.
being kind to myself, I guess, that there's a lot outside of our control and things can come up any day. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds really important to have self-compassion and not overdo it.
yes,
And how about there's a lot of productivity advice out there. Is there any that you found that doesn't work for you?
a lot. Like I said, like I have tried anything that I become aware of. I think a lot of productivity apps are a bit too heavy or they rely too much on like focusing on them as their own task to sort of run and administrate. And even when I'm talking about Notion, sometimes the task of managing the Notion board becomes like another thing. So I think any productivity apps that are too heavy to use, I might get really into them for a few weeks and then the effort of running the process gets too much. The good old, why don't you just write a list? If I write a physical list, like where is it? I'm going to lose it. My cat's going to eat it.
Right.
That doesn't work for me. Or like setting unlabeled alarms because the
Yeah.
alarm will go off and I will be like, I wonder what that was for. I can't remember. Never mind. Can't be that important. And then I end up with parking tickets. So
It reminds me, I used to read these really old school novels, and they'd talk about the protagonist tying a knot in the handkerchief as a reminder. I guess
mhm.
this was in the days before you would have a phone or anything that you could write things down. And I remember trying that and had the same problem of I've got two knots in my handkerchief, but what do they actually mean?
Yes. Yeah, I've seen people use that strategy of like putting the different like wristbands on in the morning and they've got little tags on them and it's like you
Ah,
can't
yeah.
take them off of your body until you've done the task.
Mm,
Um, but again, it becomes like a little bit too much effort to run the process. So it tends to just
mm,
fall away.
yeah. Whereas Pebble is super intuitive because just talking is something that you might naturally do anyway, and having it remind you verbally, I really like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm finding it helpful for me. I'm really excited for when we can do the beta program and start giving it to other people because everyone is so unique. So I'm pretty keen to see who uses it for what and at what point people get sick of it or kind of get stuck.
Mm.
Yeah.
And we might, at the end of the podcast, you'll shout out the link to Pebble, and
Oh yeah.
potentially by the time it gets released, you might be ready to do the wait list. So you're listening to this, you can Google it already, and we'll give the link at the end.
Yeah, sounds good.
So, in the spirit of self-compassion and not overdoing it, let's take a break now. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. Staying on top of tasks is easier than ever with Focus Bear's new To-Dos feature. Record a voice note describing what you need to do, and Focus Bear's AI will turn it into a structured set of subtasks and automatically prioritize it for you. You can also take a photo of a paper to-do list, and the AI will work its magic. I'd love for you to try it. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. We're back from our break, had a drink of water, and I'm keen to go back to what you were saying before about in your personal life that you have these buckets of structure and that there are things that you have to do in order to support your ability to work and not burn out. Could you talk more about what you do in the morning?
Yeah. My morning routine has gone through a lot of iterations. I feel like every time I read like a new pop psychology book, I'm like, this is one. Like I'll read Atomic Habits or something and be like, this changes everything and create like a really. I've had points in my life where there's so much structure to my morning routine that it's like planned out pretty much minute by minute.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll last like a few weeks at best. And then I'll get overwhelmed by that level of structure and just quit it entirely like a fad diet. Uh, so I'm a little bit more like self-compassionate now. I tend to wake up about 6:30, take about half an hour to get ready. Like I said before, like I very much prioritize my sensory needs. So I try to keep it really simple in terms of like, I don't know, easy hairstyles and not kind of elaborate outfits. I often, if it's a day where I'm going out and about, I might pick my outfit the night before just so there's not that extra decision to make when I am up. And then I'll have breakfast. Again, it's like breakfast is just the same every day, reduce the decision fatigue. And then whether I'm working from home or going out, I usually get going about 8 o'clock. But yeah,
Nice.
I found like I am a morning person, but if I have too many steps in my morning routine, it starts to eat into like my deep work capacity for the morning. So I try and just keep it really simple because as soon as I log into work for the day,
Mm.
there's lots of decisions and lots of steps. So
Yeah. And when you start work, do you have a particular set of things that you'll do first thing or a different every day?
I am guilty of I will check all of my emails and stuff first thing. I'm going to try your strategy of like delaying that a little bit because you can end up on a goose chase of like some unexpected thing popping up. But yeah, I do start with all of my notifications, try and strip out any new tasks from people's messages, and then get my Notion board set up for the day and kind of just put that side by side with my calendar and see how much time I've got for work versus meetings.
Nice. Yeah, it gets hard when you have people emailing and messaging from other countries, and then
Yeah.
there's a lot when we wake up in Australia.
Yeah, for sure.
And then at the other end of the spectrum, how do you wind down at night?
I always laugh at the spectrum. I feel like we're not allowed to reference anything being a spectrum anymore without implying that it's the autistic spectrum. But yeah, my day definitely feels like a spectrum of, I don't know, heating up in the morning, getting going for like, depending on the types of work I'm doing. If it is all deep focus or all meetings, I usually will only work a 6 hour day because I realize that I just run out of capacity. Or if it is a mix of the two, because it's such different parts of my brain, I might do like the 8 hours. But I always try and log off, physically shut my laptop, leave it in my office, and go and do some kind of exercise before dinner. Even if it's something tiny, it's just having that fixed place to do that. And then, yeah, really like limiting the amount of technology that I have in the evening. It's probably a bit controversial, but I've cancelled all of my streaming services and I've gone back to just owning a DVD player and a really like limited range of movies, which has been helpful for like, I don't just have that like endless doom scroll of Netflix available. And then I don't know, the course of the night sort of depends on the day, like chores that need to be done. But I tend to wrap things up about 9 o'clock, and it's a bit of a nana bedtime. But 9 o'clock, I tend to just like put all the lights really low, put my phone away in a different room, and just read a book or, yeah, try and like slowly wind down and leave all my thoughts for the next day. But it's easier said than done.
I'm in favor of 9 p.m. bedtimes too. That's when my son goes to bed now, and I'm very grateful because it
Yeah.
used to be 11 p.m., which is way past my natural bedtime.
Yeah.
And having the circadian lighting, dimming the lights, I find that works really well for me too.
Yeah, and warm tone lighting. I think I've learned that like sleep is extra important for neurodivergent people as a generalization, but it's definitely extra important for me. Yeah.
Yep, me too. Okay, so now back to the waitlist. Where could people find Pebble online and sign up if they're interested?
Yeah, I guess I'll do a little bit of a plug. So the website is just pebble.tech. There's a waitlist there. There's a bit of information about how Pebble works, what it does. I'm also most active on Instagram in terms of like lots of behind the scenes of how the development's going. And yeah, we're going to have a beta program live next year. So I'm recruiting lots of different diverse people to join that. So
And when
everybody.
we say next year, it's 2026 because the podcast will probably come out then. So
Oh,
by the time you listen to it, it
it'll be
probably will
this
be
year.
ready.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the plan.
Awesome. And if people want to connect with you personally,
Yeah. LinkedIn, it's probably the best space. I'm just Avalon McWha on LinkedIn. There's not too many Avalons, but I'm the one with ADHD in the title. So that's me.
awesome. Do you have any final words or asks for the audience?
Not for the audience, I guess, but just a big thank you for facilitating something like this. I know you've got such an amazing backlog of episodes. And yeah, I think it's really cool the work you're doing and the work you're doing for the community outside of just Focus Bear. Like, really appreciate what you're doing. And thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks, and likewise. Thanks for everything that you're doing. We'll wrap the show with that. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.